Good afternoon, and welcome to our roundtable on leadership tools and practices for a robust safety management system, or SMS. I'm Stuart Mader, and I lead the Public Transportation Agency Safety Program, or PTASP, Technical Assistance Center within FTA's Office of Transit Safety and Oversight. We're also joined today by Andrew Lofton, a contractor supporting FTA's PTASP Technical Assistance Center, and a panel of industry speakers who we'll introduce in just a few slides. Throughout the roundtable, we invite you to type your questions for our panelists into the Q&A box. We'll try to get through as many of these questions as we can at the end of the webinar. These slides and a recording of this webinar will be available on the PTASP Technical Assistance Center's resource library within a couple of days after today's webinar. If you're a regular participant in our webinars, you'll notice that today's webinar format is a little bit different than our usual offering. We're excited to try out a new format that provides a great opportunity for the industry to hear from a variety of industry perspectives. Our objective for today's roundtable is to provide a forum for transit industry professionals to share leadership practices and experiences. We hope that you'll identify leadership approaches and activities for transitioning from SMS development to SMS implementation and optimization, describe methods for using information from employee reporting and SMS activities to support decision-making, and identify some unanticipated benefits of adopting a proactive SMS-based safety culture on an agency level. And now I'll hand it over to Andy to review the agenda and introduce our panel. Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Stuart. Appreciate it. My name is Andy Lofton, and I'm really pleased to be able to participate again on today's roundtable. Now, as Stuart mentioned, we're trying out a new format today, and we're going to focus our discussions today on industry experiences. And so to do this, we're going to start out with our overall roundtable introduction, and then we're going to go directly into a panel discussion. As always with our PTASP TAC webinars, we're going to end the session with a question and answer period. And so we invite you guys, as Stuart mentioned, throughout the session today, go ahead and enter your questions that you have for our panelists directly into the Q&A module on your screen. Now, we do have a number of industry speakers that are joining us today, and I'm going to introduce our panel. First, we're pleased to be joined by a member of our state safety oversight community, Mr. Andrew Innes. Andrew has been with the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, or DRPT, since late 2015. Andrew has been with DRPT, I already said that, since late 2015, starting as an SSO program manager and eventually taking over the SSO program as the administrator in 2018. DRPT SSO oversight includes oversight of the Hampton Roads Transit, or HRT, Tide light rail system in Norfolk, Virginia. Now, prior to working for DRPT, Andrew was an analyst at BNSF Railway, working on their positive train control program, and he previously worked in environmental analysis in the Pacific Northwest. Welcome, Andrew. Now, our next panelist will be Francis Julian. Francis joined the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada, or RTC, in November 2019 as the Deputy Chief Executive Officer. In his role, he leads a diverse range of agency departments, including fixed route transit, paratransit, and specialized services, human resources, safety and security, technical equipment, fleet, transit amenities, and customer care. Francis and his extensive team manage a budget of more than $367 million annually and incorporate best practices of the private sector with those of the public sector, utilizing statistics, analytics, monthly as well as annual benchmarking to ensure the agency's fiduciary responsibility to taxpayers. A 2017 Leadership APTA alum, most recently, Francis served as Vice President of Western Region Operations for Keolis Transit America, where he managed operations for 4 transit agencies. He oversaw a multi-million-dollar annual budget and managed a culturally diverse staff of approximately 1,000 employees. Welcome, Francis. Our third panelist is Mike Neuenkirchen. Mike is a transit manager for the city of DeKalb, Illinois, serving in that role since March 2022. Prior to his current position, Mike has served in senior roles in 5311 and 5307 transit programs throughout Northern Illinois, including Program Director for Bureau Putnam Area Rural Transit, Program Director for Kendall Area Transit, and Chief Operating Officer for the Voluntary Action Center of Northern Illinois, overseeing 2 rural transit programs and 5307 paratransit operations for the city of DeKalb. Our fourth and final panelist today is Jesse Rush. Jesse joined the city of Oklahoma in 2014 as a project manager for the Metropolitan Area Projects Department, or MAPS. In 2016, Jesse transitioned to the operations side of the Oklahoma City Streetcar, OKC Streetcar, joining the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority, or COTPA, also known as Embark, and became the city's first streetcar manager. Because of Jesse's success as the Oklahoma City Streetcar manager, he was also named as the project manager for Oklahoma City's new BRT project that's currently in preliminary design and set to open in 2023. As Assistant Director of Operations, Jesse provides oversight of all transportation modes, as well as fleet and facilities maintenance. So I want to welcome all of our panelists today, and we look forward to hearing from you shortly. And also, as we always do with our PTAS TAC webinars and roundtables, we want to point out some materials that have been made available to you through FTA's PTAS Technical Assistance Center library. Now, within our library, we have materials related to all components of the safety management system, also on topics that we'll be getting into today, like safety promotion and leadership topics. So we encourage you to visit that site if you have any questions. Now, if you have any specific questions regarding requirements stemming from the bipartisan infrastructure law, we encourage you to visit the website that FTA has stood up just for that information and for those questions. And you can see that link on your screen right now, and I think we can put it into the chat if it's not clickable. Also, if you have questions about requirements related to the bipartisan infrastructure law, FTA requests that you use the email address you see on your screen right now, fta-iija@dot.gov. You can submit your questions, and specialists within FTA will get a response back out to you as soon as possible. And with that, I'm going to hand the microphone back over to Stuart to review a little bit about our feedback process. Stuart?
Thanks, Andy. We want to take a moment to thank everybody who's provided feedback on all of our previous webinars this year. Your survey responses help us develop and deliver resources and tools that are most relevant to your needs. And based on your feedback, we're continuing to evolve the webinar and event format, including today's new roundtable format. Our goal is to ensure you hear from more voices, including industry speakers who offer their insight and perspective throughout the webinar. We also have audience polls at key points throughout the discussion, giving you a number of opportunities to contribute to the conversation. And at the conclusion of the webinar, you'll have another opportunity to share your feedback in a brief survey, and we look forward to your feedback on these changes. Andy, back to you to talk about audience composition.
Thanks, Stuart. We wanted to take a moment before we got started with our panel discussion to think about who we are participating today. And as we know, many different types of participants take advantage of our PTAS TAC webinars. And so on your screen, you can see today's audience. And we want to, before we share our first audience poll question with you today, we want to remind you to think about answering each poll question based on your personal perspective in your agency, as opposed to answering it as from a leadership perspective within your agency. Right? When you see the questions today, go ahead and give us your response as you participate within your agency's SMS based on your perspective and experience. And what we hope is that this will help illustrate places where gaps could exist for agency leaders, gaps between how they might perceive the progress of SMS within the agency versus maybe how that's being perceived throughout the organization. We believe that this can really be helpful and instructive as agencies adopt SMS principles and continue to mature their SMS, and as we continue to see that build into a stronger safety culture within our organizations. All right, and so I believe our next step is our first audience poll. And so if everyone could take a moment and answer the question that you see on your screen, and I'll just read it aloud. Since implementing your safety management system, have your agency's processes changed? Right, you may have seen significant changes since you started this thing. You may have had a little change, you may have had no change at all. And we'll give everyone time to submit those poll questions. And we'll take a look at our results. All right, great. Wow, a lot of responses. Thank you guys for the engagement. First of all, right out of the gate, it's going to make today's roundtable very effective. We see that the majority of folks have experienced a little change within their organization. A little bit smaller percentage have seen significant change, but looks like maybe 20% either no change or they're not sure. So thank you very much. I think what this answer is probably what we all would expect, right? As SMS, we documented first in our agency safety plan and then begin to practice things. We might find out that certain practices need to change. So thank you guys very much for that engagement. And I will now pass the microphone back over to Stuart.
I think what we see also from the poll results reflect something that I think we all recognize we're in right now, which is transition from the initial stage of PTASP and ASP development, really from the development and certification of ASPs into the implementation, the real putting ASPs in action in your agencies, putting SMS processes into action on a daily, weekly, regular basis, and seeing the change that comes from that. And so with that, I'd like to launch into our first question, which is for our panel. From a leadership perspective, how has SMS evolved at your agency? I'd love to hear some perspective from all of you on that. And why don't we start with Jesse?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. So a little background about Embark. So we operate a fixed route system, paratransit system, lots of mobility management programs, but we also operate the OKC streetcar. It's a 4.8 mile system that goes throughout Oklahoma City's downtown area, hitting all the different districts. And so what's kind of interesting about how SMS evolved at our agency was, so we started our SMS program with our OKC streetcar system startup. And so we were lucky enough that we were able to incorporate the SMS from the very beginning, right? So there's a lot of agencies that are trying to do a giant culture shift, and we haven't had to do that yet. We will as we implement SMS more effectively in our bus system. But with our streetcar system, like I said, we were able to implement that from the very beginning. And so, you know, with the help of, I'd say probably one of the best safety managers in the country, Wendy Perez, she was there to help stand up the SMS tracking and development of our SMS system, and then our Chief Safety Officer Eugene Fritz and Molly Rainey. We've really just been able to stand up a wide-reaching and just in-depth system with our SMS program. From a leadership perspective, we've really seen it change, or I guess not really change, but really allow us to dig into the details, right? So we've been able to use our tracking system to be able to use that data to implement change along our alignment. Perfect example of this is, we've been able to use our tracking system to notice that we had several streetlights out in a certain area. And so we're able to identify that as a risk, and using SMS, we've been able to work with Public Works and to get those lights replaced or to get them working again. Again, it's really been a game changer for us, and we're very, very excited to be able to implement that throughout our entire agency with the fixed route and paratransit.
That's fantastic to hear. And I think that's an important point you bring up about implementing it along with, right, sort of alongside the startup of a new mode, a new system versus some of the different considerations when you're bringing SMS into a much more established organization. And I would like to turn it over to Andrew and ask Andrew, from the state safety oversight perspective, your perspective on this one as well.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thanks for having me on here. This is the way I would answer this, and actually before I answer this, I'll kind of follow Mr. Rush's approach here, just to give a little insight on the system out here that we have oversight of. Hampton Roads Transit operates the Tide Light Rail system out here in Norfolk, Virginia, 7.4-mile system, 10 years old, been under state safety oversight its entire existence, obviously. The way that I see this from kind of the SSO perspective is, the best way I would answer this, how is leadership perspective, from a leadership perspective, how has it evolved at the agency? I would say slowly, but positively. HRT for this area out here is the largest transit operator in this kind of Tidewater area of Virginia. And, it is kind of an older agency, and we are multimodal, or HRT is multimodal, bus, ferry, paratransit, and Tide Light Rail. Obviously, state safety oversight, our purview is just on the light rail side. But, it is an older agency. And so you do kind of have some of those, kind of some sticking points, I wouldn't say some holdover behaviors or anything like that, but it's just, it's just a slower process. It's definitely moving a little bit of a bigger ship over here, but it's been a positive process. And that's why I say slowly, but positively. We're seeing a lot of positive engagement from leadership. Yes, I think it is important to point out that there has been some leadership, I don't want to say pushback, but just challenges. This is it's a new approach. Agency leadership certainly has a lot more engagement and a lot more responsibility under SMS approach. And I would say it's challenges in the sense of them just trying to understand exactly what it is their role is in this SMS. And so while it has been a challenge and while it has been slow, again, it's been positive, and it's been really nice to see the leadership down here at this agency really kind of embracing the change and embracing kind of what the future prospects hold for continuous improvement. And I mean, I think that that's just really my mantra with SMS. It's just continuous improvement. Wherever we can find the little gaps, the medium gaps, the big gaps, it's all towards the same end goal here, which is constantly moving the ball forward, onward and upward, and continuous improvement. So it's, again, it's been challenging. It's been a little slow, but again, I would say overall positive changes, positive movement in the involvement or in the evolution of the agency's leadership as it relates to SMS.
And would you say that having SMS in hand as a framework, as a toolkit, has helped management with some of those challenges in terms of navigating them?
Yeah, I think so, Stuart. And I think one of these two, another kind of evolution that I'm seeing on a leadership perspective is really just eyes into things. The SMS model and SMS approach it's allowing leadership to have, I think, a little better eyes on more granular details of things going on within the Tide Light Rail system. Again, I'm going to keep it with the light rail system, putting my SSO hat on here. Not that they wouldn't have been engaged in those kind of granular level things, under the previous 659 era. It's just now with the communication that's built in, it just really allows them an opportunity to be able to get some better hands in there, get some better eyes on what's going on at a more granular level.
That sounds good. Thanks, Andrew.
Stuart,
I'd like to go ahead.
Sorry,
Justin.
could I add on to that for 30 seconds?
Sure.
I think it really allows leadership to figure out the why things are happening, right? Instead of it just always being, well, yeah, those things happen. That's just part of it. Once you start really digging into the weeds and getting into the granular details of it, it's like, okay, hold on. Well, this also happened last month. Are we starting to see a trend? And then you're able to solve those trends, right? And hopefully be able to mitigate some of the things that you're seeing. It's like, are we operating on a route where there's always an issue? Well, how do we mitigate that? So it just, I'm a data nerd. I love getting into the details of why things are happening and how we fix them. So SMS has really helped us be able to do that. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Jesse. And now I'd like to ask Francis, your thoughts.
Yes, thanks, Stuart. Thank you for having me today, first of all. And maybe I'll do a bit of a background as well. So at the RTC here, we're a bus-only system. Pre-pandemic, we were about at 64 million passengers a year. We're roughly at 75% of our pre-pandemic number. We're a bit unique in a couple of facets. So we're not only the transit agency, we are also the roadway funding, the MPO, and we manage all the traffic lights in the county here. The other unique thing is that we contract out all our services. So obviously we own the facilities and the vehicles, but we're contracting out both our paratransit, our safety and security, and our transit system. So from our perspective, I mean, we prior to PTAS, we had a system safety program already in place, and we've worked with our contractors, actually even with the unions, to have those. So when PTAS came along, we actually used 21 of those safety elements that were already in our plan. But the way it evolved, I'll go back to what Jesse was saying, is we're actually way more granular. We're using a lot more of heat maps, the communication process in between the contractors, the drivers, even our own employees, and the feedback that we're getting really was enhanced. Couple of examples. I mean, when we're using heat maps right now for all the incidents, now we have really a robust plan of deploying our safety officers on the routes, and we're basically looking at this. It's not a static static thing. We're actually each week we're revisiting all the incidents. They're put in Tableau, and that really makes our safety complement evolve on a week-by-week basis. So in my mind, from a leadership perspective, that's really what PTAS elevated our SMS is to be probably more agile, more responsive, and really enhance the communication process within all the parties involved.
That's great. Certainly valuable to have that visibility into, as you bring up, visibility into the data on a granular level and on a frequent level. Thanks, Francis. And lastly, I'd like to invite Mike.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I work for the City of DeKalb Public Transit, and we're a small, under 200,000 population, transit program that, prior to 2019, the City of DeKalb actually didn't really have a full public transit program. There was something that was done as a pass-through operator, as a not-for-profit, and then the local university was running its own transit system. So about 3 years ago, we brought those two systems together into one, and by doing that, we're able to access a lot more opportunity for the community. But as part of that process, we also had to develop a PTAS SMS plan, and I had the maybe the interesting perspective of being the person that was as a contractor overseeing the paratransit program, being involved with developing that from the contractor perspective. But recently I came over here to actually start running the program for the city, and that has been something that really has kind of opened my eyes. So SMS has gone from being one of those things that we do because we have to do it because we want to make sure that we're not going to get gigged on it on a triennial review, to being something that is a tool that we're going to use. The way I look at it is, the team that I'm working here with is really great. I think we've started looking at SMS more as a communication tool. So we contract with TransDev to provide transit operations throughout the city. And it's one of those things that, we as a city, we're more in that oversight compliance mode. And you get kind of disconnected from the operations because you're not actually sitting there, in the radio room. You're not out there on the street per se because, you're dealing with grants and that type of thing. So what we've done is we've really created SMS more as a tool for us to communicate with the contractor, for the contractor to communicate with us. What are the issues out there? What are we seeing? What are the trends that we're seeing? What can we do with those trends? How do we mitigate them going forward? Even the point of also just engaging with the contractor. This is what we're expecting to see in terms of your reporting from a safety perspective, so that we can check up on it, maybe gets them thinking a little bit more about how they're handling their checks. So it's not just one of those things we're just going through and doing a walkthrough of a facility, or we're not just, reporting issues and just because we have to, but now it's thinking more like, hey, there's a problem. How do we resolve it? And we've started working this process of establishing resolutions to issues. That's one of those things really great to see. It's taking this plan that maybe I helped to work on a little bit as that contractor, to now taking it and saying, okay, we actually have something, let's make it work. And we really have been putting that together and making it work. It's been great to see.
That's a great example, and it's great to hear that. So I hear a couple of common themes in here that I think are really valuable. One is greater level of visibility into data trends, and looking at that more frequently. And then secondly, this notion of bringing the folks that are doing this work closer together. It's less of a something happened and you look at it after the fact. Jesse, you made a great point about that. It's looking at the how and the why it happened, not just something happened. And Mike, to your point about bringing the contractor oversight relationship closer, the more you're bringing that closer and the more you're doing that on a regular basis, the less, hopefully that reduces the chance that things happen that then have to be reacted to after the fact. That's true mitigation. It's you're building in a process where the idea is to catch something and have a resolution for it before it turns into an issue. Excellent. Well, thanks, everybody. That was a great set of responses to the first question. What I'd like to do now is bring up our second poll for the audience. Andy, I'll turn it over to you for that.
Thanks, Stuart. And everyone should be able to see on their screen right now our second poll question, which is, and first of all, this is a multiple select, so you can choose more than one, but we're trying to understand where you feel that leadership at your agency is actively engaged in your SMS. So selecting a component or multiple components of your SMS where you feel that your agency's leadership is actively engaged. And we'll give everyone a little time. All right, and we can see the results on the screen. First of all, in just about every component, we see over half of our participants saying that leadership is actively engaged, which I think is a very, very good sign for strong involvement in SMS. And it looks like with safety management policy, with our highest rating, and I think we would all expect to see this, where leadership is actually setting policy for the agency. And empowering the SMS. It's also really, really cool to see here involvement in safety risk management, right? Perhaps along with safety assurance, one of our more active components in terms of analysis, and prioritization, in mitigation. So pretty cool to see that up over 60% as well. And so with that, let's keep this topic in mind and move to our next panelist question. Stuart?
Thanks, Andy. And so the next question is delving deeper into that question around leadership. What level of involvement does your agency's leadership have with implementation of SMS? And I'm actually going to ask to start with Andrew on this one, because during our dry run, we do a practice run where we get everybody together and we prepare for doing the webinar. We talk through the questions, and Andrew had some really good points from the state safety oversight perspective, and I think it'd be helpful to bring those into the conversation. So Andrew, turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you again, Stuart. So yeah, I mean, the level of involvement with agency leadership in the implementation of SMS, definitely as far as kind of the development of SMS, just to kind of step it back for a half step, agency leadership was involved in what we saw in that poll right there. Certainly the policy statement and as Andy said, setting policy, making policy as it relates to that particular statement, and the PTASP at large and all the programs. But then getting into implementation, and one of the things that I've seen over here that's been really, really good to see as far as leadership involvement is, just to pick as a good example, is just eyes in on, say, safety inspections. And I'm talking about internal safety inspections, not safety inspections that my department would do. Although agency leadership at HRT obviously has eyes on those inspection reports as well. But really what I have seen as a great positive, and I think is an example here, is just the level of agency leadership engagement in something like a safety inspection, internal safety inspection. And, it obviously is not at every level. There's a certain threshold at which, an inspection topic or an inspection category or item would have to meet before it automatically, here at HRT, it automatically triggers an executive level review as well as an executive level response and sign off on any potential corrective action. And that's all the way up to the top, up to the CEO of the agency. It wasn't that wasn't there before, and it wasn't that they didn't have those kind of eyes, or they couldn't get their eyes in on those kind of things before SMS. It's just now with SMS, it's built into the system. It's built into how the agency is operating and how they're working now. It's really kind of almost becoming kind of a second nature. However, slowly, like I said, going back to the previous question about the evolution of SMS at the agency, it is slow, but just seeing that kind of automatic triggers being pulled when a certain level of risk is identified for a particular item, or even just eyes in on, say, things like committee meetings at a lower level that maybe they wouldn't have had attention on, and that gets into communication, which I think we might wind up talking about here later on in the panel discussion here. But really, it's just kind of building it into the system, building into the process at the agency here, leadership's eyes on things and leadership's input on things. And again, I just think the inspections was a good example down here that I like to see, kind of those automatic triggers that required some kind of an executive level or leadership level, senior executive team level input or involvement that maybe prior to SMS wouldn't maybe have necessarily happened in such a quick fashion.
Thanks, Andrew. That's great insight. Mike, I'm curious to hear from your perspective, some thoughts on that as well.
Us implementing the SMS, again, it kind of comes back to this idea of having, working with a contractor and how do we make this kind of one thing versus, like a shared plan versus one of those things where, hey, here's a plan, a piece of paper, make sure you're doing it, and then we walk away from it, trying to make it kind of an engaging thing. So what we try to do from the oversight perspective is making sure that we're keeping an eye, first of all, on regulatory requirements. What else is out there that's coming up? Keeping an eye on those FTA bulletins. Hey, we've got to start thinking about these things, start incorporating these into our plans, start incorporating those operations, because our operator may not necessarily be watching those things, and we as the grantee have that responsibility. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it then is also to just, ensure that we're, are we following up on this? So one thing we've actually done is to develop, like take the action plan of our transit agency safety plan and say, okay, these are the things that we said that we're going to start looking for. And this is actually the form and the documentation that we're going to use at a monthly review of what we're going to be walking through the contractor with, going to their site, walking through, take a look at, are they following up on the things that they're saying that they're doing in the plan? And really the element of that is not really to gig them on anything. It is to make sure that, everything's being covered. but it's also an opportunity to have a conversation. Hey, noticing this is going on with the vehicles. What's going on here? Do we have some issues with getting spare parts in, which we all do, of course. Are we having issues with, you know, timely pullouts? We're noticing that, you know, there's issues with, you know, like maybe these pre-trip inspections are not being done in enough time. So our operators coming in time and actually doing what they're supposed to be doing on pre-trips by looking at the, you know, those timeframes, things like that. So again, it's kind of an oversight tool, but it's also a communication tool. Yes, it's designed for us to be watching over the operator, but it's also really designed to also encourage that conversation about what's going on in their operations and what can we do to help. Because sometimes there's things that we can do to help as the city, as the grantee, in order to, you know, encourage their operations, whether it's providing more resources, maybe communications through the community. So it's, again, I guess if I just sum it up, it's a communication tool, and that's what our involvement really becomes at, you know, sits at, if you will.
That makes a lot of sense. It's important to have it function that way for, I think, for its perception by frontline operators as well. If they're feeling like they can bring a concern to you, or they can bring a condition or situation and see impact, see change as a result of that, I think we know that's really valuable as well. Jesse, from your perspective, and one of the things I just want to add into the question for you is a little bit about how you see the implementation, particularly the leadership kind of involvement, both for the streetcar side of things and sort of compare and contrast with the full agency and the differences there.
Sure, yeah. So just so everyone understands how we're set up. So our OKC streetcar is operated by third party, Herzog Transit. And so we'll talk a little bit about them real quick. So really let me back up. So what was interesting about our startup was, like I said, we started implementing SMS from the very beginning. And so luckily, you know, we had complete buy-in from the very beginning, not only with Herzog, but with our agency as far as SMS. And I really think that, you know, I mean, you learn this as you're going through the SMS training, that the whole mentality of SMS has to start at the top, right? From leadership down. And we've really seen that across the board with our fixed route systems, our bus system, and also our streetcar system. But specifically with our streetcar system, I mean, it's really been taken hold by the entire group with Herzog Transit. They've done a fantastic job. Our general manager, Carly Barnaby, just absolutely fantastic job of being able to take the concept of SMS, being able to push that out to all of the managers and employees within the streetcar system, and just really making sure that everyone understands the why, right? I mean, it's one thing to say you have to do this. It's another thing to understand the reasons why we're doing something, why we're tracking all of this stuff, because it's a huge, I want to say burden, but I mean, it is a huge burden, all the tracking that goes into the SMS. But once you start to understand why, and you start having systems in place for the reporting, for the tracking, for the review, you really start to see the benefits of it. And so luckily with Herzog Transit and just really the buy-in from the very beginning, we were lucky to be able to implement it seamlessly. Now for our fixed route side, so, you know, kind of going back to what I said in the beginning, you know, we've been operating bus system in Oklahoma City for nearly 65, 70 years, and SMS is new, right? But luckily our entire C-suite, from our director all the way down to our director, department heads, has taken all of the SMS training, and with all of the different department heads taking the SMS training, they understand that we need to stop working in silos, right? So maybe it was difficult for the marketing team to understand why we do SMS at first, but once you start digging into the reasons why, then they start to understand, and it's kind of fun to see everybody kind of take hold of it and be like, okay, I understand why we're reporting these safety issues. It's my responsibility too. If I see something, I need to report it too. It's not just the safety department that's reporting those things, right? So it's been fun to kind of see that grow across our entire agency. But kind of going back to the original question, we've seen total promotion, assurance, everything from the top down, not just from our CEO, our general manager or director, whatever title you want to give him. That every agency has a different title for their CEO, but also within our board and our city manager group. So it's been fantastic. And what's been interesting is kind of seeing other city departments actually take hold of it too. So like we've been able to show the data to our police department to show that, hey, we're tracking a high increased frequency of assaults or whatever it is, right? And we've been able to show them data, and they've been able to react to it also. So it's not just within the agency. It's really we're starting to see it kind of trickle out to all the different city departments.
That's excellent. Some great examples of how you really see the safety culture become embedded throughout the organization. It's like a light bulb moment for people when they see the value of it and they begin to embed it into their own thinking and see that it's not, as you say, it's not just the responsibility of the safety department. It's really everybody. SMS makes the safety culture stronger by making everybody feel responsible and involved and part of the process. And Francis, let's bring it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'll mirror obviously pretty much everything that was said before. So obviously we have a lot of committees of training. So we're as the leadership group, we're actually really involved. And because of all of those training, I think we're actually seeing a mindset change. But what I wanted to bring back maybe is a bit different. Like since we started with PTAS, our level of involvement actually increased quite a bit now. We're actually sitting in some of the safety meetings in between the union, our contractors, and some of our staff members, just to show obviously our presence, give some guidance, but it's actually it's really showing that safety is really from bottom up, but from top down as well at the agency. And I'm fortunate. I have an amazing safety team here, and they're always keeping all the employees engaged and making actually safety something that's actually fun. It's just not something that you need to worry about. So I'd pull out in the morning. They're doing contests where they're putting pucks. If a driver finds the pucks as he's doing his pre-trip or a bag, they're getting gift certificates. So it's really putting the mechanics, the operators, even the fuelers and the cleaners really have a mindset of honing on their reflexes and looking at safety really with new lens. And I honestly, I think that's really one way that PTAS actually pushed us much further than what we used to do in the past.
Excellent. Great insight. I'm going to ask Andy to come back, and we're going to have another audience poll, and then we'll go into our next question after that. Andy?
Thank you so much, Stuart. And our next poll should be coming up on the screen momentarily. And for poll question number 3, we actually have a single choice question. We're going to ask our participants to select out of these activities within your SMS, which one do you find yourself spending most time in? And our options here are employee safety reporting, safety risk assessment, safety risk mitigation, performance measurement and monitoring, analysis of safety data, communication, training, safety training. And let's get our responses. Okay, we see a pretty even spread across everything, first of all. So everybody's picking one, and it's not all falling to one category. Our highest category is safety performance measurement and monitoring, which is really good to see, thinking about, and we heard a lot of responses so far from our panelists about using data, and both for use internally and even some examples of external within the community. But we can see also safety training is high, safety risk assessment and mitigation. I think it's also important to think for a moment about our participant makeup, right? I think we looked at this earlier in our chart. About 19% of folks participating today are agency leadership, and so really we're looking at this other 80%. So it's folks in the safety department that are doing these activities. We have folks from administrative roles, from operations, and from maintenance, all participating. So with that, I think what we'll do is thinking about all of these different sources of information. Really, all these activities are going to generate information within our SMS that can then be shared up through the organization for leadership decision making. Let's pass the mic back over to Stuart to ask our next panel question. Stuart?
Thanks, Andy. And so the next question has to do with, as you think about all the activities that are taking place in your organization and thinking about building and strengthening communication around SMS across the organization, let's think about how we establish those lines of communication. In particular, the goal of that is, how does agency leadership use that information from the SMS processes to support decision making? And I'd like to start with Francis for this question. Francis, you had some great thoughts again when we had our dry run, so I'd love to have you open the discussion with those.
Yes, thank you. So couple of things for the open lines of communication, first of all. So once again, I briefly touched on this earlier, but that's really where PTASP really pushed the needle for us. But we're actually on safety. We have operators focus group that we're working on. We have emails that any employees can actually reach out to. But one of the most important thing about communications and about safety is the feedback that you're giving your employees. So when we have a concern, we're basically guaranteeing a response within 24 hours. And sometimes in the response, obviously, we need to put an action plan in place, but we're always giving a timeline of when a situation is going to be addressed. These lines are actually used. We were so surprised how much the operators, well, all the employees are using these lines of communication with us. And it actually, to go to the second portion, really helps the leadership then to make some decisions. Because once again, it's just like AFR, IFR, you can get some trends. But on those other comments, we're actually seeing some trends as well, where we're making modifications to part of our systems or infrastructures to address some of the situations that we're seeing, or the concerns that we're seeing that are coming up quite often. With PTASP, the communication lines with the union are much more robust. They're actually, it improved the relationship in between our contractors, the union, and ourselves, because it's fact driven and it's data driven. So you're taking a lot of the emotions out of the equation.
That's a great point. I think that's really important. The notion of this being about process. It's not about emotion. It's not about reaction to individual events. It's about having a process in place and relentlessly focusing on that and honing it. That's great. Thanks, Francis. Michael, thoughts? Or Mike, I should say. Thoughts from your perspective?
I think kind of building on maybe what Francis said, and I think really just a lot of what we're saying throughout the course of this this panel is where we're using communication is noticing trends. Are there complaints with this one specific geographic area that requires us to relocate a stop because of speed or safety or location of the stop compared to how far it has to pull, the vehicle has to pull out, because some of these things were put in place without real proper planning, if you will? Or are we getting some complaints about speed in a certain area of the city that we need to keep an eye on, and how do we then start working with the drivers? Bicycle safety was a big issue right at the beginning of summer. A lot of community complaints started coming into us about buses and crosswalks and not observing bicyclists as the fellow you know, fellow, users of the road, if you will. But every time we've had complaints like that, what we do is we then go back and we look at each incident. We're able to pull video, take a look and say, okay, well, maybe this really didn't happen the way that it got said that, it said that it did, but we've had 3 or 4 complaints on it within a few weeks. So maybe what we need to do is put out some education for the staff about, keeping an eye on these things. The weather's changed. It's a different, time of the season. So pay more attention to these types of things. So that's the types of things that we're looking for, even a smaller operation in a smaller community where we're not necessarily having as many data points, but we do definitely keep an eye on, these are the trends that then we can use to, like, how do we address it? Is there a policy change, an operational change, or just a more awareness that we need to have with our drivers, or even with the public? Because sometimes that's an element too. Perhaps it's not necessarily the way that we're operating the system, but maybe people need to understand the way the system operates better so that it's safer and more effective for everyone.
Excellent points. Andrew, thoughts from your perspective?
Yeah, I really picked up on something there that Francis had said, which I think is really important in this, and that's feedback.
Mm-hmm.
As far as communications, and that's not only for this agency out here that we have oversight for, but really any agency. And I would even go further and tie that into like the safety reporting, the employee safety reporting program. It's when you go and you take the time to observe, or you have observed an issue, and you've taken the time to go and report it and follow the proper channels, and then to not get that feedback. You kind of, I think a lot of us just feel like, well, my complaint just went out into the ether and nothing ever came of it, or the issue that I tried to raise, I raised it, I followed all the things I was supposed to do as they told me to, and I've never heard anything back. And, Francis mentioned the feedback, and I think that is a hugely important part of the communication piece to this. Making sure that people understand that they're being heard. And making sure that they understand that not only are they being heard, but what they have brought attention to is actually really going to be looked into, and then tying that into leadership decisions, it kind of goes back to what Jesse had said earlier on, which is helping them understand the whys, and obviously the trends, yes, but helping them understand the whys. Having these kind of communications and getting the feedback, any kind of communication campaigns that the safety department's going to do with internal staff, frontline employees union, communication to the riders, having that feedback loop coming in, and then that information being fed up to the leadership, helping them understand the whys, understanding what the trend is happening, is telling us to make proper decisions. I think is hugely important, and has been a very good positive thing to see just get better and better here at HRT.
That's an excellent point. I think the notion that being responsive to what's coming in, it's a leadership decision to do that. And part of the value, I think, in that is it is an element of safety promotion. If people see that reporting a safety concern, a safety condition gets action, they're going to tell their colleagues. If somebody says, hey, they noticed something, if a person out there has had follow through on it, guess what? They're going to say to their buddy, hey, you should report that. I reported this other thing, and guess what? They took care of it. And I think you bring up a great point around that. Jesse, let me turn to you for your thoughts on this one as well.
You bet. Thank you. One of the things that we've seen is that you almost have to, if you're trying to bring SMS into a system that's been established for a while, you almost have to work on a total culture shift too, because like if you're wanting operators to self-report safety items that they see out on the alignment or around the grid or something like that, you have to make them be able to feel comfortable doing that, and you cannot penalize them, right? So it's the whole idea of SMS talks about it, is I believe it's like the whistleblower clause or whatever, right? So if you feel comfortable being able to report something that you've seen, and where it's not punitive, where you're not going to end up in front of a review board because of some safety item that you brought up. And so, that's been a bit of a challenge for us, is to make our staff, make our operators, make our maintenance staff feel comfortable bringing safety items forward that they've noticed. And the way you do that is by exactly what everybody else has talked about, is, being consistent when they bring something up, and getting back with them, and not, making them go 2-3 weeks, not seeing change, not getting follow-up, not, getting the call back. And all goes back to that communication, keeping the lines of communication open. And I'll be honest, it's been a bit of a challenge for us to convince our staff that we're not here to ding you. We are here to find out what the issues are and solve those. And by solving those, it's going to allow you to do your job easier, and be able to allow you to do your job more safely, right? And so it's been an uphill battle, but again, it all goes back to communication and follow through. And it takes staff, and it takes people committed to SMS and committed to safety to do that. And luckily we have that here in Oklahoma City. And I think the more and more that we continue that communication and follow through, I think we'll see more and more safety things come forward, which, might be a bit concerning, because everything takes a little bit of capital funds or funding to mitigate. And so we got to make sure that we are prepared to as things are reported. And then the follow-up question, using information from SMS, I think we've covered that quite a bit on some of the other questions, but again, it goes back to having that granular data to be able to show your board, or whoever, is you're reporting information to be able to support decisions that you need to make. We've had several things where we've had to have some pretty substantial cost in some of the mitigation that we've done, but we've been able to show that this is trending. And if we, I can't remember what the hierarchy thing is, where it's like every 300 safety near misses leads to whatever, and eventually you're going to end up with a death. We're able to show that these things are trending, and if we don't mitigate it now, it's only going to get worse as things begin to deteriorate. Systems begin to deteriorate. If we don't fix these things now, it's only going to get worse.
Yep. Communication and follow through. I think those are really important. Those really underscore everything that we're talking about here. So thank you. So I'm going to ask Andy to come back for our last poll, an audience poll, and then we've got one more question for the panel. And I want to quickly just plug before the poll comes up. If you have questions you want to ask the panel, we're going to ask one more question, have group discussion on it just for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to turn it over to your questions. So if you haven't put a question in the Q&A, now's the time to do it. Andy?
Thanks, Stuart. And thanks everyone today for your participation. Last poll question is, from your perspective, where have you personally observed the most change or impact from the implementation of SMS on your agency and your agency's operations? We've heard a lot of examples from our panelists, but we really want to hear from all of our participants today. Where have you seen the most impact? All right, in a second, we will close that up and take a peek at our results. All right, the results are in. And let's see, the highest answer here was 37% of our participants felt that they have seen the most impact. And this is really important. It's a great thing to see. Better frontline worker representation and safety processes. 22% of participants feel that they've seen impact in being able to better monitor safety risk. And then we have 14% in seeing improvements to how the agency measures safety performance. And then also transparency in decision-making. So, if we think about it, any one of these things is an absolutely terrific outcome, but to see a range of these things selected by our participants, I think that says a lot. Stuart, I'm going to turn the microphone back to you for our last panel question.
Thanks, Andy. And so for this last question, we thought about the unanticipated, the things that when you're and you think about the world before SMS and coming into bringing this new approach into your agency, what are the things that you've observed now that you have SMS in place that you couldn't have anticipated before you started implementing it? What is, in a way, the question is a little bit about what has surprised you. And by surprised, I mean that in a good way. Things that having a new approach in place, you might not have anticipated, but you're seeing the benefits of it now. I'd like to open this one up. Whoever would like to answer this one, jump right on in.
I can start. This is Francis Julian. So, well, first of all, in the picture, it kind of makes me tingle because there should be a sign that there's a wet floor there, because that's a definite hazard. But I think the thing that really really surprised us the most is the level of cooperation with the union. I remember back in the days before our system evolved. A safety meeting was basically a bucket list. You had employees come in and you had a long list and they would almost go, and it was on the leadership and the management team. What we're seeing now is actually a reversal of that. It's a total involvement. The union, the employees are actually part of the solution. I think that's actually wonderful. It's empowering the employees and it's engaging our employees. So that, in my mind, is what is making our SMS so successful right now, because there's a level of engagement within the agency that we priorly did not see.
That's excellent. I think that's really valuable to hear. And thanks for making that point on the picture. We deliberately put these background pictures in the presentation with what I would call hidden hazards. And by hidden hazards, I mean that to the untrained eye. To those of us that work in this, you look at the picture and you just can't unsee it. And so I'm glad, Francis, that you brought up that point. It's a good illustration of how quickly we can notice potential hazards. Mike, I see you off mute. Did you want to share a thought?
Yeah, I think for me, what was very surprising about SMS and what I really didn't anticipate was how it went from being this document that we just had to have so that we're not getting gigged on our triennial reviews again, to actually being something that, we're using on a daily basis to encourage conversations between us as the city and the contractor, but also, as we've been talking about the panel, also, with the contractor, with their staff, getting eyes opened about, hey, there's a safety issue, and not being afraid to say something about it, because we're going to see that there's going to be action taken on it. And even, beyond that, complaints from the public or issues brought forward from the public, that we're addressing those, and that there's follow-ups, that they see those things. And so really SMS really becomes a, it's a tool for, it's a tool for communication. I mean, I keep coming back to that, and I hate to sound like I just keep saying that over and over again, but it really is. And that was the most surprising thing to me. It just, how it became a living, breathing document that we use on a daily basis, and not just something that just sits on a computer or on a shelf that we pull out every 3 years.
That's a great point. That's what we all want it to be, and I think it's valuable to hear that in practice. Jesse?
Excuse me. Yeah. So I mean, it's really just the same thing that everybody else is saying. Is it's fun to watch everybody just buy into it, right? So it's similar to Julian. Like, I was concerned. I'm like, is people that aren't necessarily frontline or in the weeds, in the ops side, are they going to buy into this? But I feel like they have, and what's fun to watch is just their commitment to it. And like I've mentioned earlier, like, people that don't normally deal with safety, they're walking around, and sometimes it's in jest, sometimes it's legitimate, but they're like, this seems like a safety issue, right? And it gets kicked up, and we review it in our SSOC meetings, and we come up with mitigations, and it's it's really been great and just fun to watch everybody buying into this, and we're starting to see it spread throughout the organization. So it was, it wasn't necessarily anticipated that it would be such a forthcoming buy-in. We thought that we would have a lot of people say, you know, this is just a lot of extra work. Why aren't we doing this? But we really haven't seen that, and it's been fantastic. It's been really, really fantastic.
That's great to hear. And Andrew, I'd love to have you close it out with a few thoughts, and then we will turn it over to our audience questions.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I just echo everything that's really kind of already been said. And you know, particularly a point here that Michael had made, which is, you know, this is a living document, you know, and taking this living document and actually turning it into practice. It's not just ink on paper, making up words and sentences. I mean, it really is a living document that the agency is using on an ongoing basis to, you know, really not only turn into practices, but evaluate existing practices and better, you know, again, continuous improvement, betterment where they can. And that's really been a very pleasing thing to see here. You know, as far as surprises or anything, you know, unanticipated, yeah, you know, I would agree. I mean, the level of engagement is certainly a little higher than what I had anticipated. I didn't, you know, not that I ever anticipated it was going to be like pulling alligator teeth over here. But, you know, I mean, as some folks have pointed out and have talked, you know, I mean, this is a shift, this is a change. And we constantly in these discussions about SMS talk about safety culture. And, you know, it takes a long time. It takes a bit. You know, it takes a hot minute to build some culture, especially if maybe you had some toxic culture to begin with. And, you know, not that it was a toxic culture down here, but, you know, just the level of engagement, the embracing of SMS certainly has been a little bit better than what I had initially anticipated. I certainly did anticipate that some folks were going to look at this, as Jesse had said, like, oh, you know, this is just going to be a bunch more paperwork, and, you know, you're just making my life miserable, more, you know, even more miserable. You know, while there still is some of that, it's certainly not as much as I think I anticipated when this really got rolled out, and HRT really started embarking on this development and implementation of the PTASM and of the SMS. So that's been good. That's been very heartening to see. You know, we're not quite there like Jesse is with, you know, in jest or not, you know, folks pointing to safety issues. We're getting there. We're getting there, and it's good to see that. But you know, it's one thing too that I've had to repeat down here a couple times is, you know, even from the FTA perspective, you know, FTA has made very clear that they even understand that this is a process and that this is going to take some time. You know, I think when folks were initially seeing 673, 674, and, you know, all the new state safety oversight as well as agency requirements and PTASK, you know, I think a lot of folks really did get a little freaked out about kind of, this is something that is going to be an expectation of change in a very quick amount of time. And, you know, I think that even having FTA come out and make clear that even from their perspective, they understand that this kind of cultural shift is going to take a little bit. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. So, you know, I think trying to kind of alleviate some of those concerns down here has been helpful. I think having agency leadership understand that, you know, even at that higher level, federal level, that, you know, this is a process that's going to take some time. And how is it as an SSO that not only can we come in there and ensure that you're doing what you say you're going to be doing, but how can we be, you know, of some kind of assistance? How can we help the agency be able to go on this path, on this journey towards a better safety culture, you know, continuous improvement. So it's, you know, it's exciting times to see. Absolutely.
It's always nice to be pleasantly surprised, to see buy-in and uptake really take off, to have something function as a living document and see people see the value of it. So those are excellent points. And I think your point about time, that is certainly very true. This culture change takes time. And part of that time element is people seeing something in action and seeing that it's working well. And that's not an overnight process. That takes, people need to see that happen. They need to see it happen again and again and see that it's not a flash in the pan and get comfortable with that change. And I think that's a big theme, I think, in all of this that's really valuable to keep in mind. Well, I want to say thank you to all of you. This has been a fantastic discussion. You offered some wonderful insights and a wide variety of kind of perspectives from your agencies, and also some really important common threads that I think are valuable to hear. We are going to open it up to the audience for some questions. We've had some questions come in via the Q&A, but before we do that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy for just a minute to mention resources that are available in the PTAS PAC library, and then we'll go to questions. Andy?
Thank you so much, Stuart. And we just want to take a moment to promote the services that FTA makes available, is still making available to the transit industry. And those are the services offered through FTA's PTAS Technical Assistance Center. A lot of you may already be familiar with the Technical Assistance Center and the services provided. There's a tremendous store of resources, including templates, sample plans, checklists, guidance documents that can help you in understanding PTAS requirements, also in looking at some best practices regarding SMS operation, implementation of your SMS. So the PTAS TAC website, great place to find a lot of that material. There's also some PTAS FAQs, if might be a good place to start if you just got a question. But we do want to point out that FTA does have a team of specialists that are reviewing a PTAS TAC inbox. So PTAS-TAC@dot.gov. If you have any, PTAS related questions, please submit those, and FTA will get a response back out to you soon. Also, the PTAS TAC provides voluntary reviews of agency safety plans. So if any of the agencies that are participating today maybe have recently updated an ASP and want FTA to take a look at that, FTA will receive the plan and use a checklist based on established requirements to help provide you feedback in that document update process. Now, those reviews don't connote an approval or a compliance from FTA. It's simply to give you feedback and additional information as you update your plan. But we just want to let everybody know that those are being received. So if you're interested, please reach out to the PTAS TAC.